The day I sued my own parents started with my 9-year-old daughter standing in the kitchen doorway, silent tears streaming down her face, holding her tablet and shaking hands. No words, just that look. The look every mother dreads. The look that says something inside your child just broke. I dropped the plate I was holding. It shattered across the floor. But I didn't care. I crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and took the tablet from Astrid's hands. My mother had posted a photo of my daughter. My beautiful, autistic, struggling to fit in, trying so hard every single day daughter. Astrid's school picture. The one where she'd finally managed a real smile after 20 tries. And there, underneath that precious face, my mother had written in bold letters, "Every family has one mistake." 43 likes. Including my father. Including my sister. Including people from our church. Our neighborhood. People who knew Astrid. Who'd watched her grow up. Time stopped. My vision tunneled. I heard Ben's voice from somewhere far away, shouting something. But all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears like a war drum. Astrid whispered 4 words that would change everything. "Why does Grandma hate me?" Then she ran. Her bedroom door slammed so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I stood there, staring at that screen, at my mother's cruelty displayed for the world to see. And something inside me that had been bending for 32 years finally snapped clean in half. Ben grabbed my shoulders. Ada, look at me. What are you going to do?" I looked up at him, and I knew my face must have scared him because he took a step back. My voice came out cold. "Flat? Absolutely certain. I'm going to destroy them. If you're watching this, and you've ever had someone in your family treat you or your child like they were disposable, like they were less than, hit that like button right now. Subscribe because this story gets so much bigger than one social media post. And drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to make the choice between keeping the peace and protecting your child. Because that day, standing in my kitchen, staring at that screen, I finally made mine. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because this didn't start with that post. It started 32 years ago when I was born. The 3rd daughter to parents who wanted sons. The child who cried too much. Who asked too many questions. Who never quite fit the mold they'd built. Growing up, I was the difficult one. That's what they called me. Difficult. Dramatic. Too sensitive. My older sisters learned early how to navigate my parents' expectations. How to smooth their feathers. How to laugh at the right jokes and nod at the right times. But I never got the manual. I asked why when I should have said yes. I cried when I should have smiled. I needed space when they demanded presence. The only person who ever understood me was my grandmother. My mother's mother. Grandma Rose lived in a beautiful old house on Maple Street. 3 bedrooms and a wraparound porch. The kind of place that smelled like lavender and old books. She had what everyone in the family called quirks. She arranged her teacups by size every morning. She couldn't handle surprise visits. She had a routine for everything. And if you disrupted it, she'd shut down for hours. My mother called her difficult too. Said she was getting senile. Losing her grip. Couldn't handle normal social interaction. But I knew better. Grandma Rose was the only one who ever looked at me and saw something other than a problem to fix. When I was 16, sitting on her porch swing after another fight with my parents, she told me something I never forgot. "Ada," she said, arranging sugar cubes in a perfect line. "They're going to call you broken your whole life. They're going to say you're too much and not enough all at once. But you're not broken. You're just different. And different scares people who've built their whole lives on being the same." She left me her house. I didn't know it then. But she'd written it into her will 2 years before she died. When I was barely 20, the house would go to me, held in trust by my parents until I turned 18. And then it would transfer to my name. Except it never did. When Grandma Rose died, my parents moved into that house within a month. They said it was temporary, that they'd sell it and split the proceeds among all 3 daughters. Then, temporary became permanent. Months became years. I asked about it once, when I was 23 and looking to buy my first place. My mother laughed. "Oh, honey, Grandma wasn't in her right mind at the end. That will wasn't valid. She left everything to us. I believed her. God help me. I believed her. Because that's what you do when you're raised to doubt yourself. When you've spent your whole life being told your perception of reality is wrong. You believe the people who are supposed to love you, even when your gut screams that something isn't right. I met Ben when I was 25. He was kind and steady, and he thought my quirks were endearing. We got married. And 2 years later, Astrid was born. She was perfect. 10 fingers. 10 toes. Huge gray eyes that seemed to take in everything. But by the time she was 2, I started noticing things. She didn't like to be held too tight. Loud noises sent her into meltdowns that could last hours. She lined up her toys instead of playing pretend. She memorized entire books but couldn't tell you what she wanted for lunch. My mother said I was being paranoid, that I was projecting my own problems onto my daughter. "You're making her weird," she told me over coffee, in that voice that sounded concerned but felt like an attack. "Stop coddling her. She needs discipline, not doctors." But I took Astrid to a specialist anyway. And when the doctor said autism spectrum disorder, sensory processing differences, need for routine and predictability, something clicked into place. The way Grandma Rose had lined up her teacups. Her need for routine. Her shutdown when plans changed. Grandma Rose had been autistic. And so was my daughter. And probably so was I. Though I never got formally diagnosed. Never quite let myself believe it could be true. I didn't tell my family about Astrid's diagnosis. I should have. But I already knew how they'd react. I'd seen how they talked about Grandma Rose after she died. How they rewrote her memory into something embarrassing. Something to laugh about at family dinners. Remember how she'd freak out if we moved her furniture? Remember how she couldn't handle Uncle Rick's jokes? They'd made her into a punchline. I wouldn't let them do that to Astrid. But I couldn't protect her from them entirely. We still went to family dinners. We still showed up for holidays. I still, God help me, still tried to win their approval. Still hoped that maybe this time they'd see me as something other than the daughter who never quite measured up. Astrid was good at masking. Better than I'd ever been. She learned to hug when expected. To make eye contact even when it hurt. To sit through loud dinners at my parents' house, even though I could see the tension building in her shoulders. At home, she'd crash. Spend hours in her room with her weighted blanket and her noise-canceling headphones. Recovering from the effort of being normal. My mother never saw that part. She only saw Astrid at her most controlled. Her most contained. And she decided my daughter was spoiled. "You let her get away with too much." She'd say, "She needs structure. She needs consequences." Structure. As if Astrid didn't have more routine in her life than anyone I knew. As if she didn't have visual schedules and social stories and carefully planned transitions for every change in her day. The tension built slowly over years. Little comments about how I was raising Astrid wrong. Suggestions that what she really needed was stricter discipline. Criticism of every choice I made. From the therapy appointments to the special accommodations at school to the way I let her stim freely at home. Then came last April. Spring break. Astrid was 9. Thriving in ways that broke my heart with gratitude. She had friends who understood her. Teachers who supported her. A whole team of people who saw her as brilliant and capable and exactly who she was meant to be. My mother asked if Astrid could spend the day with her and my father. I hesitated. But Ben convinced me. "It's one afternoon," he said. "What's the worst that could happen?" I should have trusted my instincts. I picked Astrid up that evening. And she was quiet in the car. Not peaceful quiet. Shut down quiet. The kind of quiet that meant something had gone very wrong. At home, she went straight to her room. It took 2 hours before she'd tell me what happened. My father had yelled at her for not looking at him when he talked. My mother had grabbed her hands when she was stimming. Told her to stop acting weird. They'd taken her to a restaurant without warning. With fluorescent lights and collision of sounds. And when she'd had a meltdown, my mother had threatened to leave her there if she didn't pull herself together. I called my mother that night. Tried to explain, one more time. About autism. About sensory issues. About how Astrid wasn't being defiant. She was being overwhelmed. "You're making excuses for bad behavior," my mother said. "You're turning her into you." I hung up. Blocked their numbers for 3 days. But then came the guilt. The voice in my head that sounded like my mother telling me I was overreacting. Being dramatic. Making problems where none existed. I unblocked them. Apologized for being harsh. Agreed to bring Astrid to Sunday dinner. We went. Astrid wore her headphones. She ate in the other room. My parents made pointed comments about children who can't sit at the table with adults. I smiled and changed the subject and felt something inside me start to crack. Then came that Tuesday in September. The tablet. The post. The word mistake attached to my daughter's face like a brand. I stood in my kitchen, staring at that screen, and I felt every year of my life crystallize into clarity. They'd done this to me. Called me difficult. Dramatic. Too much. Made me believe I was the problem. And now they were doing it to Astrid, marking her as defective before she even had a chance to build her own armor. I called my mother. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "Take it down," I said. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a joke. It's a picture of my 9-year-old daughter with the word mistake underneath it. Take it down. Maybe if you didn't let her spend so much time unsupervised online, she wouldn't have seen it. This is really about your parenting. Ada." I hung up, took a screenshot. Then I blocked every single member of my family on every platform I could find. Ben stood in the doorway, watching. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking they don't get to do this. Not to her. Not anymore." Astrid came out of her room around dinner time. She looked at me with those huge gray eyes. So much older than 9. "Why did Grandma call me a mistake?" I knelt down in front of her. "Because Grandma is wrong. Can we make them stop?" And that's when I knew. Yes, we can. The next morning, I started searching. Old documents, family records, anything I could find about Grandma Rose's estate. Ben helped, pulling boxes from the attic, sorting through papers we'd stored and never looked at. We found it 3 days later, tucked in a folder marked miscellaneous, a copy of the will, filed with the county, dated 2 years before Grandma Rose died. To my granddaughter, Ada Marie Thompson, I leave my house and all its contents. My daughter Catherine and her husband Michael shall serve as trustees until Ada reaches the age of 18, at which point all property shall transfer to Ada's name. I was 32 years old. That house had been mine for 14 years. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Sabrina Hull, and she had a reputation for being ruthless. I told her everything in under 10 minutes. "Do you want to win?" she asked when I finished. "I want my house back, and I want them to know they can't do this anymore." She smiled. "Then we'll get along just fine." Sabrina moved fast. Within a week, she'd pulled the original will from county records, traced the property transfer, or rather the lack of it, and documented every year my parents had lived in a house that legally belonged to me. "They were supposed to transfer ownership when you turned 18, she said, spreading papers across her conference table. "Not only did they not transfer it, they've been claiming it as their primary residence for 14 years, paying property taxes on it, refinancing against it twice. They've treated your property as their own. Can we make them give it back?" "Can we? We're going to." She tapped the papers. "This is open and shut. They had a legal obligation as trustees. They violated that obligation. The house is yours. The only question is how much fight they want to put up." "They'll fight," I said. "They always fight." "Good," Sabrina said. "I like a fight." She filed the lawsuit on a Wednesday. Quiet. No warning. The papers were served the next day by a process server who handed them to my mother at her front door. My father standing right behind her. I wanted to be there. Sabrina said no. Let them process it first. Let them make the first move. The first move came an hour later. 37 missed calls. Voicemails ranging from confused to angry to threatening. I listened to every single one and felt nothing but a strange, cold satisfaction. My mother's voice, "Ada, what have you done? Call me right now. This is insane. You're trying to make us homeless?" My father's voice, "This is what we get for taking care of that house for you all these years? You ungrateful, selfish girl. Your grandmother would be ashamed." My sister Rachel's voice, "I can't believe you're actually doing this." Mom called me crying. "How can you live with yourself?" I saved the voicemails. Sabrina said they might be useful. Then I picked up on call number 38. My mother, breathless. "Ada, please. We can talk about this. You don't understand. Grandma wasn't well when she wrote that will. She wasn't competent. It won't hold up. She was perfectly competent. I said. She was autistic. There's a difference. What are you talking about? The same thing that's wrong with Astrid. The same thing you called weird and embarrassing and senile. Grandma Rose was autistic. She wasn't losing her mind. She just processed the world differently. Silence. Then, that's ridiculous. You're making things up to justify this. No, I said. I'm done justifying anything to you. Take the post about Astrid down, or I'm making all of this public. She laughed. Actually laughed. Public? Who do you think will care? Everyone who saw what you wrote about a 9-year-old child with a disability? Everyone who's watched you treat her like she's defective? Everyone who might be interested in grandparents who steal their granddaughter's inheritance and then call her dramatic when she asks for it back? I hung up. The post came down within an hour. But the war was just beginning. My parents hired a lawyer, filed a countersuit claiming Grandma Rose had been mentally incompetent when she wrote the will, that she'd been manipulated, that the document was invalid. They painted a picture of an old woman who couldn't function, who arranged teacups obsessively, who couldn't hold a conversation, who clearly wasn't capable of making legal decisions. Sabrina was thrilled. They're doing our work for us, she said. Every time they describe her as incompetent, they're describing autism. Classic. Textbook autism. We prove that. We prove they're discriminating against a disability. And their whole case falls apart. She subpoenaed medical records. Found 3 different doctors who'd noted Grandma Rose's autistic traits, but never formally diagnosed her because she'd grown up in an era when autism in girls was invisible. She found bank statements showing Grandma Rose had managed her finances perfectly for 60 years, had paid every bill on time, had even helped my parents with money multiple times. She found letters, dozens of them, that Grandma Rose had written to me over the years. Careful, precise letters that showed a woman who was meticulous, loving, and absolutely clear about her intentions. But my parents weren't done. They started a whisper campaign. At church, at the PTA, anywhere they had social capital. Ada was mentally unstable. Ada was making up stories about Astrid's autism to excuse bad parenting. Ada was trying to steal from her elderly parents. Ada had always been difficult, dramatic, impossible to please. The rumors reached me in fragments. Friends asking careful questions. Teachers looking at me with concern. Other parents pulling their kids away from Astrid at the playground. I could have stayed quiet, kept my head down, let the lawyers handle it. Instead, I made a post. I posted Astrid's formal diagnosis, with identifying information blocked out. The official letter from her developmental pediatrician, the neuropsych evaluation, the school accommodations, all of it. Then I posted the screenshot of my mother's original post, the one calling my daughter a mistake. And I wrote one sentence: "This is what ableism looks like in families." The response was nuclear. Within hours, hundreds of shares. Parents of autistic kids, autistic adults, teachers, therapists, complete strangers who'd seen similar dynamics in their own families. The comments section filled with stories of grandparents who rejected autistic grandchildren, parents who called their neurodivergent kids broken, families who chose stigma over understanding. My mother's church friends saw it. The PTA saw it. My parents' neighbors saw it. And suddenly, the whisper campaign reversed. Now people were asking my parents why they'd called a child a mistake, why they'd refused to learn about autism, why they were fighting so hard to keep a house that didn't belong to them. My mother tried to do damage control, posted her own response about how the original post was taken out of context, how she loved Astrid, how this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by her dramatic daughter. Sabrina called me laughing. They just committed perjury. They're claiming in court that your grandmother was incompetent due to mental illness. They're claiming in public that they're loving, supportive grandparents. They can't have it both ways. The court date was set for November 15th. The 63 days between filing and trial were psychological warfare. My parents didn't just fight back. They came at me with everything they had. They showed up at our house at 7 a.m, pounding on the door until the neighbors came out to watch. My father screaming about ungrateful daughters. My mother sobbing theatrically on our front lawn, wailing about how I was making them homeless in their old age. I called the police twice. Both times, they left with warnings. My sisters staged an intervention. cornered me in the Target parking lot with rehearsed speeches about family loyalty and forgiveness. Rachel grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises. "You're tearing this family apart," she hissed. "Over what? A house? Money? Is that really worth destroying Mom and Dad?" I looked at the bruises on my wrist that night and thought about all the invisible marks they'd left on me over 32 years. The ones that didn't show. The ones that made me question my own reality, my own worth, my own daughter's value. Their pastor showed up at my door on a Tuesday morning. Tall man. Silver hair. Expensive suit. He had kind eyes and a voice like warm honey. "Ada," he said, like we were old friends. "I've known your parents for 20 years. They're good people. Flawed. Yes, but good. Can we talk about grace? About what it means to honor your father and mother?" I let him talk for exactly 3 minutes. Then I said, "Did they tell you what they called my daughter?" He hesitated. "They mentioned there's been some family tension. They posted a picture of my 9-year-old autistic daughter on Facebook and called her a mistake. They got 43 likes. If that's what good people do, I'm happy being a bad daughter." I closed the door in his face. The settlement offers came every few days. First, they'd stay in the house for 5 more years and pay me $1,000 a month. Then 10 years at $2,000 a month. Then they'd give me half the value of the house and keep living there. Then they'd leave me the house in their will. Then they'd pay me $50,000 and I'd sign away all rights forever. Sabrina laughed at every single one. "They're panicking," she said. "That's good. Panic makes people sloppy." But the worst part was Astrid. She heard things at school. Other kids whose parents went to church with my parents. Whispers about how her mom was mean. How her grandparents were being kicked out of their home. How some lady at church said her mom was going to hell. She came home one day, eyes red, and asked me if I was a bad person. I knelt down in front of her, held her face in my hands. "No, baby. I'm a person who's done being treated badly. But they're saying you're stealing their house. I'm taking back what was always mine. There's a difference. It feels scary. I know. It is scary. But you know what's scarier? Teaching you that it's okay to let people hurt you just because they're family. That's not a lesson I'm willing to teach you." She thought about that for a long time, organizing her smooth stones by size, then by color, then by texture. Her little ritual, her way of making sense of chaos. Finally, she said, "Grandma Rose would be proud of you." And I realized my 9-year-old daughter was braver than I'd been for most of my life. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, playing out every possible scenario. What if we lost? What if the judge sided with them? What if their lawyer was better? What if I'd been wrong about everything? Ben found me at 3 a.m, sitting in the kitchen in the dark. He didn't say anything, just sat down next to me and held my hand. "I'm terrified," I whispered. "Good," he said. "If you weren't scared, it wouldn't matter this much." November 15th dawned cold and gray. The kind of morning that feels like an omen. I put on my best suit. The navy one I'd worn to job interviews and funerals. Armor for battle. The courthouse steps were packed. I didn't expect that. Reporters with cameras. People I'd never met holding signs. Support autistic rights. Ableism isn't family values. Justice for Ada and Astrid. Strangers had shown up to support me. I had to stop walking and just breathe for a minute. Inside, the courtroom filled up fast. My parents sat on the left side with their lawyer. A man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd never lost a case in his life. My mother wore pearls and a black dress, already dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. My father had that cane, playing up the frail elderly parent angle. They looked like victims. That was the plan. I realized, look helpless. Make me look like a monster. Sabrina sat next to me. A fortress in a power suit. She had 3 briefcases full of documents. Every paper color-coded and tabbed. She'd prepared for this like she was going to war. Because she was. "You ready?" she whispered. I thought about Astrid. Safe at home with Ben's sister. About Grandma Rose, who'd seen me when no one else did. About every time I'd been called difficult. Dramatic. Too much. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." Their lawyer went first. His name was something pretentious. Marshall or Winston or some old money name. He stood up and immediately went for the sympathy angle. He painted my parents as devoted caregivers who'd sacrificed everything to maintain Grandma Rose's property, who'd poured their own money into repairs and upkeep, who'd been promised by Rose herself that the house was theirs. He showed photos of my mother gardening, my father painting the porch. Look at these dedicated, loving people. Then he went after Grandma Rose. Mrs. Rose Thompson was a deeply troubled woman, he said, his voice dripping with false compassion. She couldn't maintain normal relationships. She had obsessive-compulsive behaviors. She would spend hours arranging and rearranging household objects. She couldn't handle social gatherings. She had what witnesses described as complete meltdowns if her routine was disrupted. This is not a passable woman who should have been making legal decisions without oversight. I felt Sabrina's hand on my arm, holding me in place. I wanted to scream. He was describing autism. He was making neurodivergence sound like incompetence. He had witnesses. My aunt, who testified that Grandma Rose wasn't right in the head. A former neighbor who said she was peculiar and antisocial. Even a doctor who said she'd shown signs of significant mental distress. Then he played his trump card. He called my sister Rachel to the stand. Rachel wouldn't look at me. She testified that I'd always been jealous of my sisters, that I'd made up stories for attention, that I'd had a concerning attachment to Grandma Rose that was unhealthy. She said I'd manipulated an old woman into leaving me her house because I couldn't earn my own way in life. It took everything in me not to react. Sabrina squeezed my hand under the table. Then their lawyer turned to the will itself. He argued that Grandma Rose had been unduly influenced by me, that she'd written the will during a period of declining mental health, that my parents, as her primary caregivers in her final years, had every right to expect the house would be theirs. He wrapped up with a passionate speech about family and loyalty and how some children will do anything for money. He looked right at me when he said it. The implication was clear. I was the villain in this story. He sat down looking satisfied, like he'd already won. Then Sabrina stood up. She didn't rush, didn't go straight for the attack. She started soft. Your Honor, may I approach? She walked to the judge's bench and handed her a document. This is a recent analysis by Dr. Seymour, Jennifer Martinez, a leading expert in autism diagnosis, particularly in older adults and women. She reviewed all available information about Mrs. Rose Thompson, her medical records, her bank statements, her letters, her daily routines. Dr. Martinez's conclusion, with 98% certainty, is that Rose Thompson was autistic, not mentally ill, not incompetent, autistic. She turned to face the courtroom. Everything opposing counsel described, every behavior they pointed to as evidence of incompetence, is textbook autism. The need for routine, autism. The careful arrangement of objects, autism. The difficulty with unexpected social situations, autism. The so-called meltdowns, those are called sensory overload. And they're a documented part of autism spectrum disorder. She walked over to the evidence table and picked up a stack of bank statements. These show that Rose Thompson managed her finances flawlessly for 63 years. Never missed a payment. Never overdrew her account. In fact, she loaned my client's parents money on 4 separate occasions, which they never paid back. Is that the behavior of someone who's mentally incompetent? She held up letters. These are correspondence from Rose Thompson to my client over a 15-year period. They show clear thinking, emotional intelligence, and careful planning. Mrs. Thompson knew exactly what she was doing when she wrote her will. She knew her daughter and son-in-law would try to keep the house for themselves. That's why she filed it with the county 2 years before she died. That's why she included specific language about the trust and the transfer at age 18. She was protecting her granddaughter from people she knew would take advantage. Sabrina's voice got harder. And let's talk about that, shall we? My client turned 18 on March 7th, 14 years ago. On that date, her parents had a legal obligation to transfer ownership of the property to her name. They didn't. They've been living in a house that belongs to my client for 14 years. They've refinanced it twice, taking out over $200,000 in loans against a property they don't own. That's not caregiving. That's theft. My father half stood up, face red. His lawyer pulled him back down. Sabrina wasn't done. Opposing counsel wants you to believe this is about a troubled old woman who didn't know what she was doing. But this is really about a family that's built their entire identity on punishing people for being different. Rose Thompson was different. My client was different. Her daughter Astrid is different. And this family has systematically labeled that difference as defective, as broken, as incompetent. She pulled out printed screenshots, mounted on foam board. My mother's post calling Astrid a mistake. The likes from family members. Comments I hadn't seen before. People laughing, making jokes about special needs kids. This, Sabrina said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade, is what happens when people are allowed to weaponize disability. When being autistic is treated as being less than human. When a grandmother's way of processing the world is used as evidence to steal from her granddaughter. She turned to my parents' lawyer. You want to argue Rose Thompson was incompetent because she was autistic? Fine. Let's put that on the record. Let's establish the precedent that autistic people can't make their own legal decisions. Let's tell every autistic adult in this country that their wills, their contracts, their choices don't matter because their brains work differently. She paused. Let that sink in. Or maybe, just maybe, we can acknowledge that being autistic doesn't make you incompetent. It makes you autistic. And last I checked, that's not a crime. It's not a disease. It's not grounds for invalidating someone's clearly stated wishes. She walked back to our table. The will is valid. Rose Thompson was of sound mind. She knew exactly what she was doing. And my client has waited long enough for what's rightfully hers. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. The judge looked at my parents' lawyer. Response? He stood up, stammered something about medical expertise and family testimony and reasonable doubt. But his heart wasn't in it anymore. You could see it. He knew he'd lost. The judge didn't even recess. She looked at the documents in front of her, looked at my parents, looked at me. Her face was unreadable. I've reviewed the evidence, she said. The will is properly executed and filed. Mrs. Rose Thompson's medical records show no evidence of dementia or mental illness. The behaviors described are entirely consistent with autism spectrum disorder, which is not grounds for incompetence. The defendants had a clear legal obligation to transfer the property at the appropriate time. They failed to do so. She looked directly at my parents. You've lived in a house that didn't belong to you for 14 years. You've taken out loans against property you don't own. And when your daughter finally asked for what was legally hers, you've done everything possible to avoid accountability. She turned to me. Is Thompson, the property is yours. It has been yours since you turned 18. The defendants have 90 days to vacate the premises and settle all outstanding financial obligations related to the improper loans taken against the property. She picked up her gavel. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The gavel came down like a gunshot. My mother screamed. Actually screamed. Not words. Just a sound of pure rage and disbelief. My father tried to stand up and stumbled, nearly knocking over the table. Their lawyer was already shoving papers into his briefcase. His face, carefully neutral, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. I sat there, frozen. Sabrina squeezed my shoulder. We won, she said. Ada. We won. But I couldn't process it. Couldn't feel it. I just kept staring at the judge's bench, at the gavel still resting where it had fallen. People were standing up, moving, talking. Reporters rushing out to file stories. Strangers who'd come to watch reaching across the aisle to shake my hand, to hug me, to tell me I was brave. I walked out of the courtroom in a daze. The November cold hit me like a slap, and suddenly I could breathe again. My mother was there, waiting by the doors. She looked smaller somehow, older, but her eyes were full of hate. You've destroyed us, she said. Not yelled, just stated it as fact. Are you happy now? We have nowhere to go. We'll be out on the street. Your own parents, homeless, because you couldn't let go of your grandmother's delusions. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd spent 32 years telling me I was wrong, difficult, too much. This woman who'd called my daughter a mistake and thought she could get away with it. You had 14 years, I said. My voice was steady, calm. 14 years to do the right thing, to tell me the truth, to transfer the house like you were supposed to. You chose not to. Every single day for 14 years. You chose to lie to me. That house is our home. It was never yours. It was Grandma Rose's. Then it was mine. You were just squatters with the keys. She reached for my arm and I stepped back. Fast. Don't touch me. I'm your mother. You're the woman who called my daughter a mistake. You don't get to be my mother anymore. Her face crumpled. But I didn't care. I was done caring. You have 90 days to get out. If there's anything of Grandma Rose's left in that house, any letters, any photos, any of her things, you leave them there. They're mine now. She wanted me to have them. She wasn't in her right mind. She was the only one who ever was, I said. She knew exactly what all of you were. That's why she left everything to me. My father appeared behind her, leaning on that stupid cane. This isn't over, he said. We'll appeal. We'll fight this. Sabrina appeared at my elbow. You have 90 days to vacate. If you're not out, I will have the sheriff remove you. If you damage anything in that house, I will pursue criminal charges. If you contact my client or her family again, I will file for a restraining order. Have your lawyer call my office if you have questions. Otherwise, stay away. She took my arm and steered me away from them. Ben was waiting by the car with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. He wrapped me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe. You did it, he kept saying. Ada, you actually did it. And that's when I finally felt it. The relief. The vindication. The sheer exhausted triumph of winning a battle I'd been told I couldn't win. I started crying. Big. Ugly. Gasping sobs right there in the courthouse parking lot. Ben just held me and let me fall apart. The next 3 months were surreal. The story went viral. National news picked it up. Autism advocacy groups shared it. Disability rights. Lawyers used it as a teaching case. I got interviewed for podcasts, newspapers, blogs. Everyone wanted to hear about the woman who sued her parents for stealing her inheritance and won. People stopped me everywhere. The grocery store. The gas station. Astrid's school pickup. They wanted to tell me their stories. About the aunt who stole from their grandmother. About the uncle who took advantage of their autistic brother. About the family members who weaponized disability to steal. Control. Abuse. You made me realize I could fight back. One woman told me. Tears in her eyes. I thought I just had to accept it because they're family. But you showed me family doesn't get to treat you like garbage. The woman at our favorite bakery started giving us free muffins. For standing up to them, she said, winking at Astrid. Your mom's a badass. Even the parents at Astrid's school who'd been weird and distant after the initial post started coming back. Apologizing. Asking questions about autism. Actually listening for once. But the best moment came 3 weeks after the trial. Astrid's teacher pulled me aside at pickup. Her eyes red like she'd been crying. I need to tell you something, she said. That whole situation, watching what you did for Astrid, it made me think about my own son. He's 7. He does a lot of the same things Astrid does. The lining up toys. The meltdowns with loud noises. The way he remembers every train schedule but can't tell me what he wants for lunch. I always just thought he was quirky. But I got him evaluated. He's autistic. She grabbed my hand. I could have spent years making him feel broken. Making him feel like something was wrong with him. But because of you. Because you fought so loudly for Astrid. I know now that there's nothing wrong with him. He's just different. And different is okay. She was crying for real now. You saved my kid from growing up the way your mom made you grow up. Thank you. I didn't feel brave. I felt exhausted. Wrung out. Like I'd run a marathon through hell wearing shoes made of glass. But I also felt something else. Light. Like I'd been carrying a weight for 32 years and finally set it down. My parents moved out in the middle of January. During a snowstorm. I didn't plan to drive by. Didn't want to see them. Didn't want the confrontation. But Astrid asked if we could. I want to see them leave, she said. I want to. Know it's real. So we drove past Grandma Rose's house. My house. On a gray, Saturday afternoon. Moving trucks lined the street. Boxes stacked in the snow. My father directing movers with sharp, angry gestures. My mother sitting on the porch stairs. Wrapped in a coat. Looking like she'd aged 10 years. I slowed down but didn't stop. Astrid watched out the window. Quiet. Do you feel bad for them? I asked. She thought about it. No, she said finally. They were mean to Grandma Rose. And they were mean to me. Mean people don't get to keep stolen houses. Out of the mouths of babes. Are you sad? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Was I sad? To lose my parents. My sisters. The whole family structure I'd grown up with? No, I said. And I meant it. I'm relieved. We didn't move into the house right away. It felt wrong somehow. Like we'd be sleeping in their ghost. Plus it needed work. Needed to be cleaned top to bottom. Repaired. Repainted. Needed to be ours. Not theirs. I hired people to do a deep clean. Industrial strength. Get rid of every trace of them. Then Ben and I spent weekends painting. Choosing new curtains. Replacing the carpets they'd stained. Making it into a home instead of a crime scene. The first time I walked through it empty. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. This kitchen where Grandma Rose had lined up her teacups every morning. Where she'd taught me to make cookies. Carefully measuring ingredients. Everything precise and in order. Where she'd told me I wasn't broken. Just different. I kept my promise. I said to the empty room. I didn't let them do it to her. I didn't let them do it to me. I swear I felt something. A warmth. A presence. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe grief and exhaustion were making me feel things that weren't there. But I chose to believe that Grandma Rose heard me. That wherever she was, she knew I'd finally stood up for both of us. We moved in on a Saturday in March. Astrid chose the room that faced the garden. The one with windows she could open when she needed fresh air and close when the world got too loud. We painted it the exact shade of blue she wanted. We installed blackout curtains and put up her favorite posters and arranged her weighted blankets and her stim toys exactly where she wanted them. Ben built her a reading nook in the corner. She sat in it that first night with a book and her tablet and looked at me. This feels safe, she said. Good, I said. That's what home is supposed to feel like. I haven't spoken to my parents since the courthouse. My sisters tried to play mediator for a while. But I made it clear I wasn't interested in reconciliation without accountability. And accountability wasn't something my parents were capable of offering. Eventually, the calls stopped. I'm not sad about it. I thought I would be. I thought I'd feel guilty or torn or like I'd failed somehow. But mostly I just feel free. Astrid is thriving. She's in a new school where the teachers understand autism. Where stimming is accepted. Where she doesn't have to pretend to be someone she's not. She has friends who get her. She comes home happy more days than not. And she knows, in the way only a 10-year-old can know, that her mother went to war for her. That she was worth fighting for. That she was never, ever a mistake. I think about my mother's post sometimes. About that word. Mistake. About how easily it rolls off the tongue when you're talking about people who don't fit your definition of acceptable. About how much damage one word can do when it comes from someone who's supposed to love you. But I also think about what happened after. About the people who stood up and said no. That's not okay. About the community that formed around defending a child's worth. About the message Astrid learned. That she is valuable exactly as she is. And that anyone who says different is wrong. 3 generations of women in my family were called defective in one way or another. Difficult. Dramatic. Incompetent. Broken. Mistakes. None of us were. We were just autistic. And there's nothing wrong with that. My parents lost a house. I found peace. Astrid found safety. And every single day, I wake up in the home my grandmother left me, and I think about how she saw me when no one else did. How she knew I'd need this. How she made sure I'd have a foundation even if it took me years to claim it. They spent my whole life calling me difficult. Now they can call me a property owner. And honestly, I think that's an upgrade. The fight isn't over. Not really. There are still family members who think I went too far. Who believe in keeping the peace at any cost. Who think I should have been the bigger person. But I've learned something important. Keeping the peace and protecting your child are sometimes mutually exclusive. And when you have to choose, you choose your child. Every time. No matter what it costs. Was it worth it to blow up my family? To air everything publicly? To spend months in legal battles and courtrooms and fighting whisper campaigns? I look at Astrid in her safe room. Stimming freely. Building elaborate structures with her blocks. Humming to herself because she can. Because no one here will tell her to stop being weird. Yeah, it was worth it. So here's what I want to know from you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting someone you love? Have you ever looked at a relationship and realized the only way forward was to burn it down? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to hear your stories. And if this resonated with you, if you've ever been called dramatic for having boundaries or difficult for demanding respect, hit that like button and subscribe, because there are more of us than they want us to believe. And every story we share makes it easier for the next person to stand up and say no more. They wanted me to be grateful for scraps. I took the whole damn table, and I'm not sorry.